Hi, and welcome to another episode of Behind the Shot. This is Critique Show number 8. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Behind the Shot. Those of you in the YouTube chat, thanks for chiming in. I appreciate everybody that's been sitting there waiting until we got started. I'm Steve Brazill. This podcast normally is a show where we try and get inside the mind of great photographers by taking a closer look, quote unquote, behind one of their shots from conception to completion. All the stories and challenges that happen in between, but not the critique shows. By the way, the normal podcast you can find at behindtheshot.tv, and you could subscribe to it either in audio-only format or in a video format, if that's something that you prefer, and if your podcast app supports video. And of course, it's also available here on the YouTube channel. But these critique shows are only on the YouTube channel. And first up, I want to welcome my standard co-host here on these shows, Mr. Don Komarechka. How are you, sir?
I'm great, and thank you, Steve, for making this whole, like, all the machinery work behind the scenes that you do so well to make it look seamless.
Well, I don't know that I do it so well. As you know, we've been through 2 or 3 days, and Troy's already laughing, 2 or 3 days of me testing, because I've never done this with me and 2 people, and I tried doing it one way and it didn't really work, so we switched back to kind of the standard way that I do it. So again, Don Komarechka, on the screen that you're looking at now, he's in the upper right-hand corner. Don, wave. In fact, you know what? Let me just do this and it'll make it easier. I'll just throw some names up there. And Don is the host of the Photo Geek Weekly podcast and a bunch of other stuff. He's a macro genius and one of the photographers probably that I respect more than almost anybody that I've ever met. And then there's this guy. This is the first time that we have done a critique show with a guest. And so Don and I are super happy to welcome Troy Miller. Troy, how are you?
I'm good. Now I'm more nervous.
As you should be.
Screw up.
No, as you should be. And here's the thing. Don and I normally get straight into a photo. I mean, we jump in pretty quick, but since it's the first time with a guest, I just want to take a second to, and I'm going to turn off the names up there. I just want to take a second to kind of introduce Troy. So here's the deal. When Don and I first started talking about doing this, we immediately said that we wanted to get to a point where we had guests on, because Don and I are kind of consistent voices, and doing rotating guests, it will kind of mix it up, right? We'll get a different voice in there. Well, Troy is a wedding and fine art photographer, and I am not exaggerating when I say he is one of the best wedding photographers I've ever met. He's one of the best wedding photographers I've ever seen. And I called Troy to be on the show, and I told him why when I called him, and this is why. When I first met Troy, I was doing a presentation on concert photography for a local photo group. And Troy convinced me to join the group. Troy later convinced me to join the board. Troy later convinced me to start entering image competitions. Then Troy started convincing me to start judging at local image competitions around Southern California, and literally mentored me through it, taught me everything I know about judging an image competition, is probably the person who has taught me more about photography from that sense, from critiquing an image comp, than anyone else. And I am literally just super, super excited to have you on the show. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you. And I just PayPal'd you that $100. That
appreciate it. That's what I was going for.
For that introduction.
That's what I was going for. Don, do you want to tell people really quick how they can submit images to this?
Yeah, so we've got a Flickr group. And so it is Behind the Shot on Flickr. And there's going to be a link. I don't know where you put the links in the show notes or wherever else. But if you just type in Flickr Behind the Shot, I'm sure you'll find us. The logo is recognizable. Any image that you put in there can be discussed amongst people within that group. But if you want us to specifically single it out, and we can't do it for everyone because there's a lot that gets submitted, but we do choose them at semi-random. And you would just put the tag, Flickr has its tagging system of btscritique in there, so that we know exactly what images you'd like for us to single out and talk about on the show here.
Yeah, and that's pretty much it. And by the way, it's not a hashtag. Use the Flickr tag to do it. And so, Troy, you are the guest. So as we go into our first shot here, this shot is called Lake Louise. What do you got?
Lake Louise. This is one of those kind of shots that I look at and I want to be there. I want to go stand there and I want to take my own shots there. So I'm very impressed with the location. Right off the bat, for me though, I struggle a little bit with the lack of a center of focus. So the overall image is beautiful, the reflection is beautiful, but where's the hook for me? Where's my leading lines? What's going to draw me in? And I feel like the tones are a little flatter than maybe I would prefer. And I think that could have something to do with being shared over the internet. Flickr tends to compress things a little bit based on the original. So I would probably crop up from the bottom and drop that horizon just a little bit. I would really like that, and darken that sky just a tad and keep some detail in that snow. But I love the symmetry that's going on in here.
Okay. You want to go next, Don?
Yeah, I mean, I've been to this location. I've been to Lake Louise in Banff, and it is picturesque. It's beautiful. I mean, this does it justice. But I think Troy was right when he said, there's no hook in the image. This is a perfect backdrop, but it needs an actor. It needs something to guide your eye in, and I can see it in the frame. Like if I were there now, and I were to make a day out of taking a photo, I would go through a couple of extra hoops. You can see there's people standing on the left edge of the frame. One person is wearing a red shirt. I would ask them to get in one of the canoes and just go out in the lake. Just do that as a favor. What's it cost to rent a canoe? $20? Pay $20 to get a better photo. I mean,
right.
If you're spending your day making that image, then that would make it so much more picturesque to have somebody doing that. Maybe you were traveling. A lot of people don't travel to Banff alone. Then you would have somebody with you. Get your spouse, significant other, friend, colleague, whoever, to go out there and be the active participant in making this shot a better image. There's one other thing I wanted to touch on. The tops of the mountains are darker than the rest for no reason. They're not in more shade, and this happens to be a common post-processing, I don't want to call it a pet peeve, but I notice it a lot. When you're trying to recover skies, you'll often see halos around mountains, which I do not see here. So, thumbs up for that. But I would just take even a simple dodge tool in Photoshop and dodge the shadows or the midtones up on the edges of the mountains just a little bit to make it look less post-processed.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with what everybody said. This is Lake Louise in Banff National Park, and it's one of the most beautiful places you will ever go to. That's a glacier in the center in the back, and the glacier is pretty clipped. So first of all, to me, the biggest problem with this image, I love the viewpoint. This is an iconic viewpoint right out of Chateau Lake Louise, and the biggest problem that I have with the image is just the contrast level. There are no shadows, really, to speak of where there should be in this. They've all been lightened too much. The water kind of matches the exposure of the sky. I kind of want the reflection in the water to be a little bit darker. I agree with Troy. Crop up from the bottom. You don't need all of that down there. But lower the exposure down and get a little more contrast into it. Watch your highlights when you're doing it. And I'd also argue a better time of day would actually be nice. There's one other thing, and I think it's the 12 millimeter shot, but the horizon line, it's giving me a feel of being bowed, but at the same time, it looks straight. There's something with the horizon line that feels like it's still kind of bowing a little bit. And so I would just watch when you're shooting at this type of wide angle that your corrections come out good. Yeah, Troy's pulling up the card to check it right now.
Yeah, I can't bring it up into Photoshop.
But do you see what I'm talking about?
Yeah, there's a bow in there.
It's either crooked or it's bowed.
Yeah, it's the shore is probably leading away towards the center, and it gives it that perception. So even if it's not, the perception sometimes really does kind of play in. And something else from these type of shots is that if this is a shot a lot of people have shot at before, how can you shoot it different than they've shot it?
Right.
Because it's been seen so many times. Take a different look, throw a rock out there, make a ripple, do what Don says, put a canoe out there, something like that. I love
agree.
it though. I've never been there, and I want to be there. So one of these days I hope to collect this for me, for myself too.
Final thought, I was there 20 years ago. That glacier was bigger.
About the same time as me, actually.
So the glacier in the background was bigger 20 years ago. Just saying. Let's move on.
Yeah, pronouncedly bigger. And by the way, when you do this hike, you hike around the right side of this shot. You can go all the way back to that glacier, and it's a gorgeous area. So great concept, just some things that I would do. But to me, the biggest thing is get some contrast in this image. So let's jump to the next one here. This one is called Eyeshadows. Don, you want to take this one first?
It's a really interesting juxtaposition of a book that I'm not sure if the exact book or the passage is significant, but maybe that could be a way that the image for any keen observer could recognize. The book looks old but pristine, and the glasses look old and anything but pristine. And so that juxtaposition, I think, is interesting, but it's almost as if the glasses were just completely abandoned and they haven't actually been used for reading. I'd like to see them grungy. I'd like to see them with fingerprints, but it looks like they were just left in an old barn for 50 years and then discovered and staged. And so that kind of pulls me out of the moment of something being really well read. It's almost as if the glasses should be a little cleaner, though still very rustic, and the book be more dog-eared to give the proper narrative in this particular story. I think the framing is great. I like the fact that I've got the bottom edge where you can see the general browning of the pages, showing that it has its age, and the top falling off to darkness. You know, in terms of border control around the edges of the frame, there's nothing that I would really improve on that. It's just building a better story based on the props you use.
Yeah, and I agree with you. First of all, I love the concept here, right? The old glasses are awesome, but kind of like what you said, Don, my problem is I don't believe the scene because the book doesn't look as old. The glasses are so dirty you can't see through them. So it's clear somebody grabbed an old pair of glasses, staged it on the book. I kind of wish the glasses were dirty, like you say, fingerprints and stuff, but at least enough see-through that I could read a little bit of text through them, I think would help. The framing on it, I like top to bottom. I wish that there was more frame to the right of this, a little bit going off so that the glasses almost had somewhere to look into. And the other thing is the depth of field. There's a ton of depth of field in front of the glasses. I kind of wish the glasses were in the middle of the depth of field so that I could see the text a little bit farther back. The book, same with the framing type thing. The book to me is too square in the frame. I kind of want a little bit of a tilt in the book. And last but not least, and again, love the concept, don't misunderstand me. I'm guessing the thing in the background is the pouch for the glasses.
Yeah, that's what I came to that conclusion of.
And it's so dark, it's so dingy looking that it's actually, this is weird, it's not the brightest spot, but it's so stand out against that book that it actually is a distraction to me.
It's the most saturated point.
Yeah.
Yep. It has color. Yep. Yeah. Good points, guys. I see this image to tell the story better needs some toning or some mood enhancement, right? Like maybe monochromatic or sepia. That would fix that orange object in the back that I don't think is really adding anything to the story. I love the concept, and these are one of those. I like the glasses. I like how they're dirtied, but I think in color clean, it's not really working for me. I think that if you were to take this and do some heavy dodging and burning, bring some focus in on the lenses of the glasses themselves, and maybe grunge it up a little bit with a texture, or like I said, monochromatic.
What if you just added noise, right? I mean, if this is old, what if you just added some old film grain?
Yeah, I think what this image is suffering from is there's multiple subjects and there's places for our eyes to bounce around in, and it's not really holding our attention. So whether you added grain or you did some dodging and burning to bring our attention really heavy on those glasses, I think that would help. We have a lot of vertical space in the image that we don't need. That's just dark right above, that orange, we'll call it the case. We could crop that out. And
in fact, there's something dark way up at the top, actually.
Yeah. And I'm not sure, but right at the bridge of the glasses, there's a horizontal line right behind the glasses. And it seems odd to me. I'm not quite sure what that is, but it drew my eye immediately. And it feels like either an optical illusion or there was some retouching that was done. But that horizontal line behind the bridge of the glasses is really drawing my eye. So this is an image that is a starter image for me. Like, I love the image, and I just think it needs to be worked and tuned and brought to that mental image that you had maybe when you set it up.
Yeah, evolve the concept, right, Troy? And you
right.
could do that. And I think one way that you might be able to do that is to find a book passage that is really powerful and important to you as a person. A favorite book from your childhood or something. The very first like real novel I read was The Hobbit, for example, and so I still have that somewhere in my closet. I might use that as a stage prop. But then you might want to underline or highlight or otherwise deface the book to bring attention to one particular word that is in the focus in order for that message to be told much more clearly. And that's where the story comes from.
Right.
That's where, to me, the glasses being a little bit cleaner where you could see through them, because that would be kind of cool if the glasses magnified a particular set of words that really stood out. So I'll take the next one. This one is called Love is in the Air. And I love these kind of shots. First of all, I'm not a huge bird photography guy, in normal cases, but this is just such a perfect time. The feeding, the wings moving, they're on a plant looking at each other, one kind of looking up, one kind of looking down. Love it. Your timing here is awesome. The motion in the wings is awesome, except to me, a little bit, and I'm talking very, I'm nitpicking here. I love the image, but the wing is so blurry compared to everything else, that forewing, that it's actually distracting to me, because the back wing has a little softness like it was moving, but that forewing, and I know you may not have been able to deal with that. You're far away shooting this at a very high shutter speed, but it does distract me that there's one thing in the image that is just extremely blurry, and it has some of the biggest surface area that I'm seeing. The composition, I'm struggling in parts. I see the whole flower pretty much at the bottom. I see a little bit of the flower on the left. I'm not saying I need to see all of it, but it feels like it was cut off prematurely. I'd like to see more of the flower on the left a little bit. Slide the birds over. I wish the birds were kind of on the right-hand side rule of thirds, or opposite is accentuate that they're heavy on the left, because it feels very heavy on that left-hand side with the branch. Accentuate that, add more space to the right. Give it a little bit more breadth, for them to have space to fly in, as it were. Let's see, who wants to go next? Don? Troy?
Troy, take it.
Okay. I mean, I'm trying to formulate my thoughts as we were saying that.
He's choked up.
I'm choked up. No, I love the shot, and I don't mind the wings. I think that they add this sense of life and movement and things like that, and I kind of dig that. What I'm really struggling with in this image is really just two things. Compositionally, I think that the birds are too far camera left, and we have this negative space camera right that we really don't need. Put these guys right in the center. It doesn't make any sense to have that extra space on the right, and you could probably crop up from the bottom a little bit. There's nothing there that is super important that you have to keep. So maybe go square or go slightly horizontal, but center the birds. I think you have room to work with that. And the other thing is it feels over sharpened. And I see this a lot in bird photography because it makes the feathers really pop out. And what it's doing, though, is it's creating a granular texture in the birds themselves. Now, that may be okay. You may be okay with that. I can just see, though, that it feels over sharpened in the bird. And I would just suggest, try to keep an eye on that, because the more that we sharpen, then the more that we want to sharpen, and then pretty soon, we've gone a little bit too far. But
yeah,
that's just
always dial sharpening back a little bit, I think.
Less is literally more.
And I would say maybe darken down using a graduated filter to have the upper upper left-hand corner a little bit darker, so that you got the big white or grayish blob on the left-hand side, so you can bring that down. Right. And the flowers on that other side are also a bit bright. Just subtly do that so that it's almost subliminal. We can't tell that it's been done if we look at the image after it's been done. And I would say a way to kind of bridge the gap between the opinions on the wing is to attach a Fresnel lens to a flash and use that in the image. It'll do a number of things. I think there's a brand, if it's still around, called Better Beamer that would attach a Fresnel lens in front of an off-camera flash to give it a greater distance, which if this is your framing on a crop sensor camera at 340 millimeters, your on-camera flash or even an external flash attached to your camera won't get you the distance. What that's going to do is it might fill in some shadows, but it's also going to give you a ghost image of some level of clarity in certain areas that have high levels of motion. You can imagine like a cyclist going down the street, and then you have a shot of them with flash added. You will have the flash adding its own exposure, which adds some clarity, and make sure that that is rear curtain synced so that it appears at the very end of the frame, and you've got this really nice added crispness to blurry motion, and it would add catch lights to the eyes. Final thought, good on Daddy Bird here for getting 4 of those grubs in his beak so perfectly. I mean, the photographer couldn't have planned that better. That is just luck. So thank you, Bird.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one. Anything else on this one?
No, I think it's. I think we've covered it really well. Yeah, I'm just playing with
overall,
it. I'm cropping in.
Nice.
Yeah, overall, yeah, just some tweaks. You got an amazingly solid image there. Just some quick balance edits.
Okay, next one up, Troy. If you want to take this one first, it's called Copper Drops.
Sure. Yeah, I was looking at this. I like the technique a lot that's going on in here. The water drops, getting those placed on there, using that copper is really fun. The thing for me, and I'm having a hard time getting over all of the color that's kind of attacking my brain, and then the shapes on top of that. And it feels like we just have too much going on all at once. If that background had been pushed back even further so that the bokeh really turned it into sort of a mix of color rather than being able to see those vertical striations and then see the striations in the water drops, I think I would like that better. But I feel like we have too many lines competing, and then the colors are just too much, reds and blues and greens all put together. I love the concept, and I'm really interested to hear what Don has to say, because I know this is really in his wheelhouse. So.
When I saw this one, that's immediately what I thought about. And before Don goes, I'm going to go, because I agree with Troy. Conceptually, I love the idea of this. But I agree. Normally, when I picture a water droplet refraction, I picture the water droplet refraction or refractions themselves being what my attention is. And here my attention isn't really on the water drops at all. It's on that wild backdrop color. Yeah. If you're going to do this, a couple things. First of all, the copper is clipped. So the upper left of the copper, almost everywhere there's a bend in the copper. You've got this weird kind of real hot spot areas on those. So I would watch that, even if you had to do multiple shots and fix it. The other thing is the drop's random placement is disjointed and loses the story to me. So if you look on the second bar from the top on the right-hand side, right in front of the right-hand side of the bluish color, there's a little drop there. There's a little drop below it that don't add anything to this picture at all. They're tiny, tiny, tiny. Same second bend down on the left-hand side, outside the bar. In fact, I can take my mouse in there and actually show you. Like right in here, there's a little bit of a drop from behind the bar, and then there's one kind of half showing through the bend, and those take away from me seeing and understanding the drops as a whole. And this one is going to be a weird one. I don't know how you would fix this because the bar itself isn't symmetrical, right? It goes farther to the right than it does to the left, but the bar does touch that last shadow on the far left of the backdrop. It doesn't touch the shadow on the right. So it feels like the bar isn't centered. The bar is a little too far to the left. And for something like this, I really wish I felt more symmetry out of it.
Yeah,
I just think it would make more sense.
There's a lot of things messing with your visual brain.
Right? Which is making it difficult to absorb. Yeah.
Right.
So here we go. Don?
Okay. I don't even know where to start because there's so much to talk about here. So I'm just going to ramble. Let's start
I'm
with
going to enjoy it.
Let's start with the background because you do have all those vertical stripes, and that is the most creative decision that you have in this process is choosing the background. I'll often choose a flower. I've gone to NASA's public domain archives and I've chosen maps of the Earth. There are things that you can choose that might have particular meaning, and I don't know what these solid bars of color actually mean. It reminds me of a test pattern on a television station that is off the air. And if that's the meaning and copper wire carrying that transmission, then use an actual test pattern. I mean, if there's some meaning there, find it, or use a flower or something that is radially symmetrical because then it will show up in the droplets as such, and it'll give you a really good representation of what it is. It doesn't have to be a real flower. If you don't want to go to a florist right now, then just print one off if you've photographed flowers in the past and put a print in behind. Okay, so it's been mentioned also about the highlights on the copper and its lack of symmetry. It doesn't always have to be completely in focus. It was probably done this way in a zigzag pattern to create a plane of focus that all fell into focus at almost all, at every single point in the foreground. But I've had some experiences with vine tendrils and twisted blades of grass that work really well when things fall out of focus a little bit, so that some parts are more important and impactful than others. To that end, you could take the same copper wire, wrap it around a Sharpie in a spiral that would maintain a spherical, symmetrical shape going down, some of it more forward and backward, and place your droplets strategically all along the focal plane that you'd like. And you can place those droplets, by the way. Some of them are so small, some just slightly in front of the metal, that seems like they might have been sprayed with a spray bottle or that they weren't necessarily tidied up. In this kind of a scenario, I would use a hypodermic needle, which you can buy a pack of them on Amazon for $10. It's not a difficult thing to get hypodermic needles. And the smaller the gauge, the better. Like an insulin needle would work just fine to just plant specific droplets in certain areas. And then if you have a droplet that you don't want in a specific area, you can also suck it up with the needle, or you can take a twisted piece of paper towel or toilet paper and just dab it onto a droplet, and it will wick that up and it'll go away and it'll help clean up your scene. So background, subject, and droplet formation all at once. There's lots of ways where you can improve this, but I want to say kudos for experimenting. I spend 8 hours in my studio doing this kind of experimentation, and sometimes I walk away with nothing but good ideas for the next time, because there's a lot of trial and error in this kind of work. And technically, from a camera perspective, aside from the overblown areas, this is now going to be a creative endeavor where you have to be a better droplet sculptor, a better subject creator, and not necessarily a better photographer, because most of that is achieved in this image.
So let me ask you this, though, Don. If one were to want to stay with these bright colors in the background, which arguably are overpowering the water droplets, is there anything you would do to, suck those into the background more and have the droplets be more focused, but still keep the concept?
If I were to be playing with very strong vertical lines, I would play with very strong horizontal and vertical lines, like in the foreground, so that the metal isn't so zigzaggy, but really sharp edged, so that it appears like this looks more like a traditional sine wave. But if it's more really just straight up and down binary style, in terms of the geometry of the foreground subject, I think you'd have greater success having things avoiding the edges and just riding down along all of what would then be horizontal lines.
Okay, so somebody was asking for Troy's information, and before we break and do that, I want to do one more while we're kind of on this concept. And Don, I'm going to let you, because you had to go last on the last one that was that style. I'll let you take this one first. It's called Mini Tree.
Mini Tree. Yes, I did a shot like this recently when we had a massive snowfall in the first half of May. And so I love the concept. I don't know how they're lighting this. I know that I've used artificial lighting to create a similar effect where I've got just a really bright flashlight off on the side and it's worked. If it's natural light, well, they nailed it either by luck or by creating shadow along the backside, because it's really important that that backside is darker than the front. Now, this also has to come into play with bokeh, where we have a bunch of out-of-focus details in the foreground and the background from specular highlights reflecting off of snow crystals. And when that happens, whether it's off of a water droplet or anything that could create a catch light that's out of focus, it will maintain sort of the aperture of the lens. And you can tell that this was shot with a 6-blade aperture because we have hexagonal geometry in the foreground and background. And I'm a bit of a sciencey nerd, and I know from extensive research that snowflakes and water crystals will form hexagonal crystals. And so that all plays nicely into that message. And then we come to this little tree. And it's pretty. It's isolated. It's desolate. It's struggling, and maybe there's a story there. But was this the only thing jutting out of the snow that you could find that was interesting? Because if this is just a plain leaf, maybe there was a flower. Maybe there was something a little taller, a little bit more dynamic in terms of the overall subject itself. Don't get me wrong. I like it, and I've shot stuff like this before. Then it brings me to the little crumble of ice right at its base, which is drawing my attention maybe more than it should, and a little hair running underneath the tip of the main leaf towards the right side. And so that's definitely artificial. I'd clone that out for sure, because it's just driving me nuts at this point. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. What say you guys?
Okay. You want to go? You want me to go, or you, Troy?
Go ahead, Steve.
Okay. Mine's going to be short, because really all I have to say is the stuff you see, Don, that I don't, is just amazing to me. I love the idea. I just think it needs more execution, and I would beg the maker of this shot to please try and do it again. Your super shallow depth of field is really nice. I love the way you did the snow, that you got those bokeh effects, but I do wish that entire leaf tree thing was all in focus, right? If you have to focus stack it, fine, but I love how shallow the depth of field is, but I want that to really super pop out. The other thing is, I don't need that much foreground at all. You can cut half of the bottom below the tree off. I mean, literally, cut it right. I'll move the mouse in there again. You can cut it right in here, and you'd be absolutely fine with me to lose some of that. The other thing is, from an exposure point of view, I actually like kind of where it's at, but I wish there was a little more attention, because there's the big shadow underneath the leaf. I kind of wish there was a little more attention on it. If I had this in a post-processing app like a Lightroom, I'd put a radial filter right around it. And outside of the radial filter, I'd bring the highlights down just a hair, maybe add a tad bit of dehaze, maybe bring a little bit of shadow or exposure down just a hair. Just not a ton, just to add a little pop of subject brightness onto the tree itself. That's all I got.
You guys didn't lead me much. I got to say too, I love this shot, and where I'm really drawn is, one, I saw the things that Don pointed out, that chunk of ice. There's also a little speck of ice on the underneath side of the leaf that needs to come off as well. And it's those little tiny nuances that once they're gone, then the subject matter itself will pop out a lot more. I love that blue. Well, I'm going to call it a gradient. I know it's not a gradient, it's the background, but I love the fact that we've got the blue diagonally in the background, and then we've got the lighter color and the white in the lower half of the frame. So crop it so that dissection of the frame is kind of 50-50, right? So you've got a highlight, you've got your subject, and then you've got your shadow, which is that blue in the background. That is just a wonderful tone within the image. This type of image, I think when you're shooting it, you need to kind of think, what do I want my subject matter to be, and what do I want my viewer to see the most? And when you've got that little branch coming off towards the camera that's out of focus, but the rest of it is sharp, you kind of got to see that in camera ahead of time. So like Steve said, maybe focus stack a little bit. So a little cropping up from the bottom, a slightly bit off from the left, because I really feel like this tree or leaf is leaning into the frame to the right, and I like the extra space on the right and get that little shadow. And then just work with the tones a little bit. I think you have a winner here. I think it's a really wonderful image and something to spend more time on.
And if you were to crop up, just like Steve had recommended, I really like some of the bokeh on the bottom. There's one that's kind of a rainbow effect right near the very bottom on the left side of the frame. Okay, so copy and paste that onto a new layer in Photoshop. Move that up higher into the frame, change its blending mode to lighten, and then crop up so that you don't lose any of that magic.
Yeah, that's a good point, is that's kind of where the beauty of the image is. It just happens to be in an area that's not adding to the image at all. And actually, who was it that had it in the chat? Matthew in the chat said, shot from a different angle to the right might be better, because then you'd end up with a little more white around the green. So the green is almost getting close to that diagonal shadow Troy was talking about. It might be interesting to get a little more separation there by moving to the right or moving up a little bit. That could work too.
Yeah.
All right. So that wraps it up for that image. And before we go into any other images, let's jump into some other stuff. So first of all, our guest, Troy, people were asking how they can find you. You are the founder of F64 Live. You're represented at Pack Artists. You do fine art photography as well as your wedding photography. You do stuff with at my old home at TWIP with Frederick. So kind of give us the rundown of every place people can find you.
There's a lot. The easiest is
give them directions to the house. Yeah.
Spicy Jello. Spicy Jello on Instagram and Spicy Jello on my website. That kind of will lead all things back to me. You can find me there. My wedding work is at imageryconcepts.com, but you can also find me through Spicy Jello there. So that's it. It's easy.
That's it. What about F64? Tell me about F64.
Oh, well, F64 is a live event that I put on every year. We're doing it this year in September. We're still in the planning right now with the state of the universe, trying to figure that out. We're going to be doing some heavy digital and virtual components on that, but F64live.com is going to have some updates here very soon. We'll be talking about that. So we bring in a lot of applicable photographers and content and things that I want to go to, that I want to see, and all my friends. I get to bring in all my friends. So
exactly. So before you go, though, you got to say one other thing. So F64live.com for the conference. Right. SpicyJello.com for the website, and Spicy Jello on social media everywhere except Twitter. Twitter is Jonesinator, but you don't.
I don't do Twitter anyway.
But I also want to get in Pack Artists. So because you do fine art, and you do have some fine art for sale over at packartists.com. Tell me about Pack Artists and what you do there.
So Pack Artists happens to be the hat I'm wearing. Is a company I started with a good friend of mine.
I don't have one of those.
I don't know. I only have one.
Jeez.
I'll work on that. But Pack Artist was a company I started with a good friend of mine, Peter Levshin, where we source fine art from photographers all over the world, and we make those available in hospitality industries and commercial custom homes, things like that, and we print them all on acrylic. And you can go to packartist.com and you can peruse some of the artists that they are there. Steve happens to be one of the artists. He humbly forgot to mention that.
I'm over there too.
Some of his stuff there. Yeah. The Pack Artist thing was more of a thing of passion that we just thought, we want to do our own thing. And we just got a new location down in the art district in Santa Ana, where we're going to be setting up a gallery for Pack Artists. It's also where we're going to be hosting F64 Live. So everything kind of melds together at some point in the things that I do. So
go look up Troy, give him some love, follow him all over the place, buy some art, do all of that type of stuff. He does some amazing infrared photography. And one last thing I wanted to mention before I jump to Dawn is when I first started this podcast years and years ago, Troy was one of my first guests that I pre-recorded before I launched. I think it's episode number 5 called Stormy Kiss. So you can go back in the archives at behindtheshot.tv and look up that episode. And I'm hoping that in the next month or so, we'll get him on to talk about one of his infrared shots as well. So Don, you published an episode today.
I published an episode that I recorded on like May 22nd of my podcast, Photo Geek Weekly, which that means it's not necessarily always weekly because I had a massive hardware failure and lost the use of my main computer. And I'm back up and running now on a what I consider a desktop replacement laptop. But so yes, photogeekweekly.com is where you can find a wonderful collection of musings of technology and ethics and copyright and all sorts of geekery around photography, the stuff that I hope everybody as a photographer cares about, even though I know I have a niche audience. So there's that. And you can find my work and all of my social media connections at doncom.ca. donkom.ca, and links to Twitter and Flickr and Instagram and Facebook and everything. It's all right there.
And then the DP review stuff, we can't forget that.
Right, and that's coming up. We've got 3 episodes that I had already published, and then there was a brief hiatus, and I was actually shooting B-roll for the next episode yesterday, and so I am going to be on DP Review TV. I got a lot of really cool ideas coming up. I don't know if I'm allowed to mention what they are, so I'll just say I'm excited.
Okay, now, if you were to accidentally say, no, never mind. We won't go there. All right, so that brings us up to the second half. We've got 4 more images in front of us, and for these, I will go first. I chose a music shot this time around. By the way, just to remind you again, go to Flickr, sign up for Flickr. It can be the free account. While you're on Flickr, join the Behind the Shot group and submit your images. If you just submit your images to the group, they will not be in the pool for image critique. Okay, so that you know. You have to actually put the Flickr tag BTS critique because some people want to share and participate in community, but they're just not ready mentally to be critiqued on something. So if you know you're ready and you want to get your images critiqued, submit your image to the Behind the Shot group on Flickr and tag it. That's what we search for. So that brings us up to this shot. This one is called Red Pearl. I'm guessing that's the name of the band. I started looking to think, is it a, Pearl drum set that's in red? And I just can't tell because of the color, but it's not. It's a DW drum kit. Couple things. First of all, your moment here is good, right? I love what you did with the moment. You've got the highlight in the back from a spotlight with the smoke kind of separated from the actual drummer himself. You've got the blur in the sticks based on your shutter speed that you did. You might have used artificial. I'm not sure if you used artificial
I'm thinking
light or
this
not.
is an LED light that has a refresh rate that is giving a pulse effect.
Could be that as well. Could be a strobing effect from the LED light. A couple of things. First of all, he's way too close to the right-hand side of the image. I'd like some more room outside of his elbow. And at the same time, I don't need the stand, the cymbal stand that's on the left side of the image. The cymbal I want, and don't cut the cymbal where I don't see the mount and felt pad for the cymbal. But you could cut that cymbal, you could cut that picture about right here where the stand is and give him a little more room on the other side. And here's the biggest thing with this image I'm really struggling with. I love his breathing that he's doing, the intense look on his face. The color is just way off. You need to set white balance on this shot, and there's a couple of ways that you could do it. Gary said that it's LED lighting, and he hates LED lights. Yeah, same with me.
Yeah.
But, if your camera supports Flickr, it's not as bad, Flickr detection, but otherwise it can be a real nightmare in concerts. But here's the thing. Use your white balance either by taste and by eye, or start clicking on things. In this image, if I were to click an eyedropper, I'd either click on the DW badge that's on the front, or right above the DW badge is a tom mic. And for that tom, the XLR plug has silver on the end. You could click on that. If you could find a piece of his teeth, you might be able to white balance off his teeth here, or just do it by eye. But the main thing is you got to get the color right. I understand this may have even been what it looks like to your eye, but it's not flattering to the person that's in it. So you need to try and color correct this to get it a little bit more flattering to the person that's in it. Who wants to go?
Troy, take over.
I'll go. I'm grinning because I disagree with most of what Steve said. From an aesthetic point of view, like he's absolutely right technically, and I agree with him 100% about the crop and everything. I when it comes to color, like I really want to see this be more extreme because I feel like the concerts themselves have a lot of color and personality, and I'm okay with him being purple. I actually dig it. I'm okay with that. It is a little close to the right. The drumsticks, I'm not a fan of that, and I think that just comes from sort of the old school photographer in me. That I know that's LED, and I wish that they were blurry like my brain wants them to be, with traditional light. I mean, maybe that's kind of cool. Maybe some people like that. A little bit longer shutter would probably help that right there. I do know that Steve could probably tell you what the shutter speed is to stop the drumsticks off the top of his head. I don't know. Photographing concerts was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And
simple math, Troy. It's at 1/250th of a second, and you got 4 of them. So if it's 1/1000th of a second, you'd get 1 of them.
There you go.
I don't do math. No.
And I took Troy to shoot his first concert. It was Warped Tour, and it was one of the funnest things I've ever done. To just stand back and watch an amazing photographer that knows his gear go like this constantly. I mean, literally, as we're shooting, he's looking at his. I mean, it was so this constant frustration, and I don't mean to find joy in your pain.
Yes,
but before Don goes, let me just say, I understand your point of the color, and I'm all for now and then you get a green shot, a red shot, a blue shot, and you want to leave it and embrace the color. This color to me on his skin is just not flattering. And actually, Gary Monroe said, what if you cropped up about an inch? To me, that would be, from the bottom, to me, that would be an actual uncomfortable spot on his knee. And the other thing that he said was, it'll probably need to be black and white since the lighting wasn't, compelling. I disagree. You could color correct this to me. Sorry, Don. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, this could look good as a black and white image too. I mean, I'm not going to discount that.
Oh, it definitely
something
could.
That I would explore.
I just don't think it has to be black and white.
Now, I mean, this might be an image that you could take into a different color space, like the lab color space, and just really muck with colors and just make something extreme, like Troy said. But the fact that it feels like it has just a purple color cast, like an improperly scanned negative, like that feel alone in terms of the color, increase the intensity, expand the palette. There are things that you can do with that color and still keep that man purple. That works for me. But I think that there's some level, again, of experimentation that could be had there. If you're shooting this, I'm assuming that you are on a continuous burst and the drummer is going to be doing his thing. If he's doing his thing, then maybe his sticks could be in a slightly different position. They're both almost vertical. One is pretty well, and the other one is almost there. So what if one was a little bit further back and one was a little bit further forward in a particular frame? It would just have some more diagonal lines that lead the eye into the frame. And if you're not shooting on a high-speed continuous burst, then maybe you should be. My previous comment about increasing the shutter speed to about 2 stops to be 1/1000th of a second might be problematic for LED lighting if the camera, and I don't know what the Fuji X-T3 has that this was shot with. If it doesn't have flicker control, it won't be able to time its exposure to exactly that same cycle. And then you'd get a bunch of medium exposed frames, completely dark frames, and regularly exposed frames in the mix. And then your hit ratio would be much less therein as well.
If I can interrupt you for a second here. First of all, I wouldn't want the drumsticks completely frozen anyway. I want to see a little motion, or it just looks like he's holding sticks up in the air.
No, I agree.
Sorry, go ahead.
And I was also about the moment of where they are. If you know sort of what the refresh rate is, and again, simple bit of math in the field, you can figure out at this, based on what I'm seeing, about 1/1000th of a second. Set your shutter speed to something that gives you an odd number. So you want 5 instead of 4. You want 3 instead of 4. An odd number of repetition of those sticks, 7, would be good too. And that I think would help hit it home a little bit. And I don't know, the man, he looks constipated. I don't know, just his facial expression is not the most flattering as well.
It's drummer face, man.
Well, sure, but there could have
face.
been a less constipated drummer face. I've seen some really good ones with a lot of concentration, maybe even the eyes closed. Just
I can't unsee it
spinning
now.
the head a little bit because you're trying to hit one of the hi-hats a little bit, and just something that's just a little bit more dynamic than sitting on the toilet. So there you go.
And I looked at the metadata on Flickr. It's 1/250th of a second. So it's not a high shutter speed. So it's those.
No, he was dragging
LED
intentionally.
Yeah, it's those
He or
LED
she.
lights, man. They're freaking evil. They're just evil.
But they're the bane of my existence when I shoot shows. The
yeah,
other
they're
thing
bad.
is it is flat. I'd like to see more contrast and localized. So get a brush, an adjustment brush. Brush it where you need, dodge and burn where you need. So a little teeny bit of dehaze would be nice on this. There's a shot here that definitely could be amazing. It just needs a little bit more massaging to me to get there. All right, next image. This one, let's go ahead and have Troy start, and it is called Autumn 2019 Memories.
Remember, Troy, when it was autumn of last year and the world was not what it is today?
Yeah. It's
Sorry,
a world away.
I just read in the chat, Andre says that's constipation shaming, Don.
Guilty as charged, I guess.
That's a new thing.
I will mail you some prune juice if anybody's offended.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So anytime that I look at an image, I ask myself, like, was this the best possible angle that you could take this photo from? And I don't know. I've never been there, but it seems to me like this is a beautiful scenery that you stood there and you looked at and said, wow, this is great. I want to capture this. And I don't feel that emotion is translating in the image. And the reason is we've got a couple different photos in the same frame. So the sky is really adding nothing to this image. And I would suggest that we just crop that out entirely, and maybe even crop off like half or a quarter of the left part of the frame, leave that one tree in there. Because to my eye, the red tree on the right, the house that's in the far distance that you can kind of see between the trees, that's the story right there for me, is like looking into this neighborhood, looking through the through the trees, that fall color. I think that's wonderful. And so that's kind of what I would do. I would crop this thing in nice and tight, maybe vignette it a little bit. You can punch colors and contrast and give it a little bit, awaken it up a little bit with the highlights. But that sky is not doing you any favors. So that's where I'm at. I can.
Don, you want to go?
I can.
Yeah, I'm where you're at too, Troy. The sky is, no matter how much you can pull that down, and there's a big dust spot in the sky. No matter how
I left those two for you.
Yeah, and of course in the upper left-hand corner too, the cut off leaves. But
now I got nothing.
Okay, but I'm looking at this photo in terms of the visual ingredients, and I love what I see. If I was in this scenario, I'd say, okay, visual ingredient number 1, the tree with the fiery orange-red leaves in the foreground. That's number 1. But number 2 is the community in behind that. And I would try very hard to combine those things together. That does not require the sky, and that does not require a lot of the other things in the foreground. So what that might require, and this can be tricky because when you start using a more telephoto lens, this was shot at 24 millimeters wide angle. If I was to be shooting at 105 millimeters, which the lens, the 24 to 105 this was shot with, could also do, I could start to narrow in on things. But when I'm shooting in that way, I'm going to also lose my depth of field. It was shot at f4. I'd have to maybe even go through to f16 or f22 in order to maintain some level of focus in the foreground and the background. Or And here's an interesting idea that a lot of people don't really, I've experimented with a little bit. I haven't done a whole body of work on it, but have intentional foreground out of focusness, where you could have those leaves recognizable but completely out of focus in the foreground, leading to a house, maybe not in the immediate foreground because you might have to skip back a couple of rows based on your angles. But then you would see in the background, the focus on the background with all of the other trees, no one of them nearly as vibrant as the one that is hitting all of the edges around the frame in the foreground, and those red leaves become a framing element. So when I'm thinking in terms of ingredients, I label what I have and I see how I can combine them together in different ways. And I think that not enough people experiment with landscape photography with telephoto lenses. 105 really isn't telephoto, but I've done some great telephoto at like 800 and 1,000 millimeter for landscape work. It can create that isolation, that simplicity in the scene that narrows it down to just the ingredients you're after.
So I've almost got nothing left at this point because not only did
just agree with the two of us. That's all you need to do.
Yeah. Not only did you guys take it, but even Andre in the chat said what I was gonna say, and I'm gonna use his wording actually. The trees in the foreground and the hills in the background are at the same exact height. Seems like there should be a little bit more separation. So here's the thing. First of all, I wish I had these colors in Southern California, but I don't. It's a beautiful scene, but it kind of just feels like a vacation photo to me. And the reason is mostly that sky. You could swap out the sky. If you do, talk to Renee Robin first and learn how to do it right. Troy knows that's an inside joke, but you could swap out the sky and immediately improve this. But one of the other things I think would improve this shot, kind of what Andre was saying, is raise yourself up. I'm assuming maybe you were driving on a road, or you hiked up here, grab a rock, stand on your car, stand inside the back of a truck, whatever. Get up higher, shoot down a little bit more, because I think there needs to be, to me, more separation between the roofs and those trees in the front. I do like the trees in the front rather than zooming in. The branches up in the left that Don mentioned, those can go too. But the biggest thing with this, to me, is just the sky. That's the biggest problem.
And
next
just
image.
to sort of add to all the photos, if you walk into a space and you can ask yourself, this is how everybody else would take this shot, you need to move. If you're just standing there,
yes,
maybe you need to get on the ground. Maybe you need to walk to the left or walk to the right or grab a branch and hold it in front of your camera. Like if this is what everybody else would do, then you need to do something different because we have the tools to be better than that.
Yep. All right, next one up. This one is a QL17 blog post flat lay. Don, you want to go first?
Sure. Film cameras. I love film cameras. There's one in my shot, at least one. And you look at what they're trying to do here. It's probably a blog post image based on the title. And so it's depicting what the person might have been doing that day, a topic of discussion based on an element that's in the frame. And so we have to kind of judge the image based on the context. I think that's very important. So number one, I'm looking around the frame in terms of lines and shapes, and I see the strap kind of wrapping around the frame, which I like. But this is where, when we're back to like an earlier image with the little mini tree photo in the snow, or even this one here, a valuable tool to have is a Q-tip or a toothpick. And just to nudge certain things in different places that might help. And so if you could create just a smoother arc around that strap that is just a little bit more curvy to maybe even match a Fibonacci spiral if you're so inclined to go that far.
Ooh, I like that idea.
But it's an element in the frame that you can control, and it's very fluid, and you have the ability to adapt and manipulate. I'm also looking at two rolls of film, one black and white and one color. I like that, but I think that this image is supposed to show the act of shooting. And if it's going to do that, wouldn't it be great if one of the film rolls was already shot? And so you had a negative laid out on the top or the bottom of the frame that had frames already displayed on it from potentially shooting that day or from a previous session, and the next roll that's ready to go. It's maybe that's just the narrative that I want it to be, because there's so many different narratives that you could play into on this. Would I want anything to be in a different position? Well, I mean, the film loading reel in the upper right-hand corner or left-hand corner is so bright, it kind of pulls me away. And so maybe if I were to control the lighting a little bit different, put a light that creates more harsh shadows to create stronger lighting on certain areas and weaker lighting on others, then you might not have it appear as white as it is. So experiment with your lighting as it all goes. And for the heck of it, turn the light meter on. Get something on that LCD screen.
Yep.
Wow. Okay. So I got nothing. No. It's just I love the layout, actually. The spiral idea, I think, is absolutely genius. I wish I'd thought of that, because that would really kind of tie all the photography stuff in. Part of the problem that I'm having, actually, is the classic film and camera, etc., with that new meter. There's a disconnect there for me. The new meter with the old gear it feels out of place to me. But again, put something, if you're going to have it in there, turn it on, let something be on the screen. There's one thought I had from having Freddie Clark on the podcast recently. He's a food photographer. And there was something in the shot that was really interesting that we talked about, and it was on a wooden table like this. And it ends out what he had done was he had taken this large apple tart, which actually looked like an apple pizza, and he had lifted it off the table by putting something under it. Your mind almost couldn't see it with a straight down shot, but the way it ended up against the table, you still got almost like a little bit of a texture going forward. It might be interesting to just put something under the meter and maybe under the camera body to lift them off the table a little bit, change the shadow on those a little bit, to just get a little bit different kind of vertical texture in those. That's about it.
So a lot of good points, and I'm going to focus basically on what's in the shot. The highlights are drawing our eyes, right? So when you take an image like this, if you flip it upside down, the first thing you're going to probably see is you're going to see the film reel, you're going to see the canister for the film, and you're going to see what is camera right. So those are things that you need to control, because you're losing the camera in the middle. And so really what's happening is our eyes are bouncing from the canister in the top left, because that's how we read a frame, is we enter the image from the top left, and then we kind of read through the photo. So we're really getting our attention drawn by that film reel in the top left. We go to the canister, we go out the top right-hand corner, we come back, and the camera and the light meter we're seeing last. Some dodging and burning, some vignetting could certainly help that, bring those elements way down and focus just on that camera with using your light. So we've got light, and we've got shadow, and we've got focus. That all controls how our brains and our eyes like to see the image. And to me, the hero of this shot is the Tri-X film box, because it's really the only thing that has vibrant color. It's got a nice tone to it, and it's fairly bright. And that's really the hero of this shot. And so, kind of work the image to that. If I was to set this up myself, and I like Don's suggestion, is that film reel would go in the lower right-hand corner. The film canister would go in the top left-hand corner because it's small and bright. And I would love to see the camera strap starting in the top left-hand corner and then coming down into the frame, because I feel that's a leading line, or maybe from the bottom left-hand corner leading into the frame, because that will lead us in. But whatever you do, keep those highlights and those shadows to the center, the highlights darker on the outside and brighter to the center, because that's where our eyes will be drawn. So play with flipping this thing upside down and just look at it and go, oh my gosh, look at what I see. That maybe that's not what you want your viewer to see.
You know what? And the more that I look at it, I don't think you need the film canister. The film roll, yes. I think the white canister you don't even need.
The film roll to me doesn't
so even, bright. It
doesn't even fit the scene, because one, you're not going to use that film roll for the color. Well, I guess you could, but everything that's in here is for shooting. Then the film roll is for processing. So maybe you don't need the film roll at all.
Well, I mean, they're two separate rolls of film here. So you're shooting color and black and white. But you're saying the film loader, like not the film canister, right?
Correct. Yeah, the film loader, the top
Right.
left,
The white.
film.
Yeah.
To your point,
man.
Troy, top left, if you're speaking in any Latin-based language that reads right to left or left to right, but
Left to right.
if you read language in the other direction from right to left, which I keep getting confused today for some reason, then you would position things in another way. And there was a case study I read when I was studying advertising about children in predominantly Arabic-speaking countries, that they would just kind of mirror the images in children's books, and the children understood them better because of the way that they were learning language. And so we read a photograph, and it's not just a term to say that we read it. Reading things is a sort of a subconscious thing where we will always be reading things from left to right if that's the way that we read our words.
Yep.
And one last thing before we go to our final image, and that is Gary said something in the chat, and he said he's actually noticing all of the scratches that are on the wood table itself.
Yeah,
and
I'd clear those out,
to
like
the image.
scratches on a negative or dust spots on a digital photo.
Yeah, I completely agree. All right, let's jump to our last shot. And Troy, you get to take this one first. This one is called Angel Mom.
Angel Mom. The mom shot is really fun to me, and I really enjoy that moment of her leaning into the stroller, and I'm assuming that like her baby's in there and stuff like that. But the rest of the image is really dominating her, and the photo really isn't of her. The photo really is of the entire scene. We don't have a single subject that I feel like is really predominant. Although she has beautiful light on her, the backlight of the couple holding hands walking, it feels like a dominant subject to me as well. Then you got the gentleman in the back on his phone. You've got focus pretty much all the way through. I know that there's a little more focus on the mom. So to me, there is just so much going on in this shot. If you really want to focus on the mom, waiting a little bit, moving to the right, maybe finding another subject. I feel this is, I don't want to use the word snapshotish, but I feel like it's just sort of a quick capture of the moment, and then mom is really nice in the background. She's very secondary in the scene. With that in mind, cropping can make a big difference. If you want to show off the mom, you could crop out the subject in the foreground, but then you're going to lose that depth of field. So this is something that if I was going to play with this image, I would probably make it monochromatic. I would do some heavier dodging and burning, bring the tones down on the foreground so that the mom clearly stood out. We didn't have colors. It would be more about shapes. And then the whole scene itself would be the photograph. So right now with the colors and the lighting, it's a little confusing on what the subject matter is to me.
Don?
All right. Well, I might leave you nothing to say then, Steve.
I'm okay with that.
There's like 6 images in this image. The couple holding their hand. That if you zoomed in on that, like with a more telephoto lens, that's a great story. You don't even have to see their entire bodies, just that one moment. There's tiny little plants growing on the ground in the bottom left-hand side that could be an interesting frame. That dog could probably be pretty dynamic if you threw a stick. There's some backlit leaves at the top of the frame that are just out of focus, or just out of the frame rather, right above the mom. There's a lot that's happening in this frame that is good, but not together. I like ice cream and I like pickles, but I don't think I'd like pickle ice cream. You have to separate the things.
I would.
Okay, well, I'll have to maybe.
This just went into it,
make some and I'll try, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
And then there's this line, this stick in the foreground that you didn't mention. That's kind of coming almost out of her butt.
That was. I want to leave you there. I knew you'd see it. I knew you'd see that stuff.
It's like a telephone pole coming out of somebody's head. It's the same idea with that kind of framing. And so again, it's all about knowing what your subject is, and photography is a subtractive art. We have so much to look at. We have to narrow it down to being just the bare minimum ingredients that make it work for us for a story. And I also want to just take a look at the woman's face. It's hard to really zoom in based on the resolution, but it does look like her face and chin and neck, they might be clipped. It's all kind of the exact same color. And if they tried to recover that because it was just overexposed, well, good on you. You didn't make it just an odd, weird gray color, but it seems like there's a suspicious lack of detail in that region of her face that it seems like there's a technical foible that may have happened there that was tried to be corrected that would have been much better attended to by adjusting the camera settings themselves.
So the stick out of the butt, I can't unsee it. Same as I can't see the decapitated dog.
Yeah.
Right? There's a lot of possible shots in this. The problem was the position that you were in wasn't the position to capture all of them in a single shot. You could have, by the way, stay. The fact that you got the guy sitting on the bench between the couple holding hands, as opposed to coming out of one of their head, that's great. If you just crop the right side of this picture and if it was properly exposed on that side of the picture, that's a shot, right? Cut in between the stroller and the girl and have the couple. I wish I could see some detail in them. I'm not saying bring them up to match the lady with the stroller. I love the idea of the light on her face. It's a little disconnecting to me, though, that the sun is clearly behind her. It's backlight on everybody. Somehow she's getting light on the inside of her bodice area and inside of her arm and her face when nobody else is. There's a weird disconnect there. There's a reflector in the stroller. But I need some detail in that couple in the front or the guy in the back and some depth of field in here. Had you moved to the right a little bit, you could avoid the tree branches intersecting with her. You could have gotten the entire dog, that type of thing. So to me, a lot of it is just you made a choice of what to clip black and what to save in bright and a position to stand. And I'm just not sure that it was the right position with that. I would almost have moved to the right and just gotten her, but then you have the issue of if you move to the right, the dog tail would be coming out of her head. So it's a great concept. I just think that you need to really think about position and intruders coming in from the outside a little bit more. Anything else on this one, guys?
I'm good.
Nope. That's good.
I think we got it. In that case, before we go, Troy, where can people find you again? Your portfolio, your social media, F64 and Pack Artist. Where can people get you?
Spicyjello.com is really the best way to find pretty much everything about me. All my links are there. The Pack Artist link.
Why, Troy? Why Spicy Jello?
Because it's like pickled ice cream. I like things that are not consciously connected, and I thought spicy Jello didn't go together, but had a nice ring to it, and then I immediately bought the domain. That was like 12 years ago. So I like it. I don't know why. That's it. That's all I got. I have no other reason for that, but spicy Jello, and you'll remember it.
F64 Live, Spicy Jello, packartist.com.
Yep. Thank you. Yes, absolutely.
And again, just because I want to push this, F64 Live is the conference that Troy does. This is what, year number 3?
Yes. This will be year 3 and the most challenging year of the 3.
Yeah, this is going to be a challenging one, but it's happening in the fall. You can get all the information at f64live.com because it's a cool conference. So, Don, that brings us to you. Where can people find you, young man?
Doncom.ca, DONKOM.ca. btscritique.Today is where you can find all of my interconnected things, and my podcast at photogeekweekly.com. I am working on an upcoming book that a lot of people always ask about. When is it shipping? And I am constantly saying, ask my almost 4-year-old daughter, who is the love of my life and a wonderful distraction and a distraction and a distraction. And I'm glad that I can carve out the time, this hour and a bit, to do this. So that's coming. That book is, you can find that at skycrystals.ca, which is from my first book. And the new book is called Macro Photography, The Universe at Our Feet. If anybody has pre-ordered it or backed it on Kickstarter, happy to send you a work in progress sample of that. In fact, I send out a good number of those every day. And Photo Geek Weekly is coming up. I should mention, I am recording the next episode tomorrow with Troy, is going to be on the show for the first time. And I'm so excited to totally geek out with him about all things pottery and fountain pens and photography.
Yes.
Yeah, Troy is a potter. Does pottery stuff, and he's really, really good. I've actually got a couple coffee mugs and shot glasses here from him.
And he's humble about it too, because he's just being silent.
Yeah, he's humble about it, but they're actually really, really cool what he does. The dude's just talented in many ways. So, Don, as always, great to see you. Thank you very much. And Troy, you are the first and hopefully of many, and you will be back. Thank you so much for doing this.
Of course. Yes. Thank you for having me. And thanks to everybody for putting up with our shenanigans today.
So that brings us up to the end. Before we leave, just a quick reminder for you. You can get in on this if you want to. If you want to submit images and have them considered for image critique, go over to Flickr, join Flickr. You don't have to pay. You could do the free account, but they could use the money. If you like Flickr, sign up for the pro account. Once you are a Flickr member, join the Behind the Shot group and submit your images. That's just playing in the community pool. If you tag them with BTS Critique, all one word, no spaces, then that also puts your image in the pool that we search for or search through for images for the image critique. And right now we're doing it probably about once a month. And hopefully we'll start having a guest on each and every time. If you've got suggestions for guests, leave them in the comments down below. But to everybody that's been here, thank you so much for joining us today. It is really, really much appreciated. Thanks as always to Dawn. Thanks to Troy for stopping by. This is Behind the Shot, the show where we try and get inside the mind of great photographers by taking a closer look behind one of their shots, at least usually. You can go to behindtheshot.tv to find the normal episodes. You can subscribe in your podcast app of choice, or you can always find everything here on YouTube. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next show.